There you go.
Excellent. That sounds good. This is WMPG W281 AC Gorham, Portland. We are Southern Maine and Eastern New Hampshire Community Radio, broadcasting live at 90.9 and 104.1 FM from the University of Southern Maine, and we are streaming on the web at WMPG.org. Stay tuned for Nonprofit Insider with David Unger.
Driving, music's blaring in my ears. Engines roaring, the horizon's drawing near. Pedal to the floor, no more feet in the door. Gonna drive right out of this bitter night. I'm a constant seeker in Converse sneakers.
Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I myself have worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years. In those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services and benefits to our community that we sometimes take for granted. Nonprofit Insider is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or of USM. Before we get started, Deb, do we know what's happening Thursday, March 19th to Wednesday, March 25th?
No, but if you hum a few bars, I'll fake it.
Okay. Rain or shine, yours and mine, WMPG Radio that belongs to you is having their spring Bag-a-thon.
The Bag-a-thon! Oh, one of my favorite times of year.
I know.
It's wonderful.
You're warming up for that, aren't
Oh,
you?
yes. It's a great celebration of who we are and what we need.
That's it. There we go. All right. So I had to put a plug in on Nonprofit Insider for another nonprofit. But joining us today is Ethan Strimling. Ethan is the CEO of LearningWorks. Welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Well, great having you here. You did a great job on the weather.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I
So-
was prompted a little bit, got a little training, got a little practiced. I appreciate that.
I mean, we have a very sophisticated weather system here too.
Digital, I noticed. It comes
Yes.
across the screen here in the digital process
The
and then
6
feeds right
screens
through.
are
Yes,
right through
exactly.
here, so-
I had to figure out the weather pattern, but
There you go.
I got to the 21 degrees.
Yeah, that's the toughest part. you
It
know
is.
that.
The temperature, I know. Yeah.
So, LearningWorks, what is it? And I know they've gone through a name change a couple years ago.
Yes.
So, why don't you tell us what it is?
We've gone through a few name changes, actually. We actually started in 1967, so we've been around almost 50 years now, and we started as Portland West Neighborhood Planning Council. We were really a neighborhood advocacy group when we began, so a bunch of people in the West End were saying to themselves, we don't want low-income people being pushed out. We want to keep this neighborhood diverse economically because it's getting gentrified. And started advocating at City Hall for funds, resources, et cetera. In 1977, got incorporated as Portland West Neighborhood Planning Council. Sort of the first big thing was to buy the People's Building, which, if you don't know, that's where Fresh Approach is, the little market right across from Reiki School, big brick building. It used to be a garment factory or something, but beautiful old building. They bought that and sort of turned it into a community center. And I came on it was at that time Jim Oliver, Larry Connolly. These are a few of the icons of our history. Bruce Reeves, the folks who really built up the organization. Trish Riley, Skip, a whole bunch of folks down in the neighborhood who were really pulling this thing together. And I came on in 1997. And we'd been through a little turmoil, to be honest. It had been done a lot of good work, a lot of visionary folks.
A
And
nonprofit that doesn't go through turmoil
Exactly,
is not
yeah.
really a nonprofit.
yes, some self-inflicted, but some outside-inflicted. But we had gone through some turmoil for sure, but we came through it. And really our evolution started as this neighborhood advocacy group, became somewhat around a housing agency. We bought a lot of housing back in the 80s. We bought high, and then we're selling low, but we bought a lot of housing to protect low-income people, and then evolved sort of into a social service agency, kind of educational work, really kind of community-based stuff. And now we changed our name to LearningWorks back in 2009, so 5 years ago, and our focus at this point is really on the educational work of trying to move people, transition people from poverty into more stable lives, into lives where they can support themselves and their families. We do mental health work as well in support of the educational work we do. So what do? We have an alternative high school for kids who drop out of school. We do after-school programming for elementary school kids, pretty much K through 5. So these are kids who are falling behind academically. We teach and tutor adults, immigrants, refugees who've never learned English or trying to gain some skills to get themselves a job, etc. And we have, as I mentioned, a bunch of case management programs that kind of are in support of that work. We do a lot of family literacy, so there's a lot of educational pieces of what we do, and that's kind of where we've landed today.
So are the, I'm just going to say the children and youth who participate rather than clients,
Sure.
the children and youth who are participating, are they neighborhood-based, or are they throughout Portland or throughout Maine?
So we have, we're York and Cumberland County both pretty extensively. We also have some programming going on in Androscoggin County, a little bit in Oxford, and actually at Down East up in Hancock County, working in a few schools there. So depending on which program it is, we're in 10 different elementary schools, Portland, South Portland, and Biddeford. And those are kids who are just in those schools who teachers have identified as falling behind academically. So maybe it's a fourth grader who's still reading at a second grade level. So we have an extended day. They can come for a couple extra hours at the end of the day, do some work, some cultural enrichment, all kinds of stuff, STEM-based work to try to help them catch up. A very important part of that program is that 90% of the kids who are in that advance a full grade level over the course of the year. So those are very strong results. We have a lot of metrics in place to make sure that we're doing it right and we really are helping people transition. So depending on the program, our alternative high school, they're coming from all over Cumberland County. We have an alternative high school in Biddeford, so they're coming from all over York County. They get referrals from JCCOs, the juvenile corrections officers. Our adult literacy programs, those are sometimes based in school. Sometimes people just wander into the building and say, I'm 50 years old. I never learned to read. I'd like to see if I could get a tutor to help me begin the process of moving my education forward. And we have about 200 people who are getting tutored one-on-one through one of our family literacy programs. So, and we have a lot of immigrants and refugees. We hold classes every day. We hold 6 classes every day at different levels of people's learning. So these are folks who have just gotten here, asylees and refugees.
I'm assuming we know the answer to this, but has the immigrant population increased over the last few years?
Sure, yeah. It's thankfully, the city of Portland would be probably 5%. We'd be shrinking if it weren't for the immigrant and refugee population. Certainly our schools would be shrinking even further. The only thing that's sort of keeping our population strong and keeping our economy afloat is the fact that new people are coming in, and a lot of those are immigrants and refugees. So in the city of Portland, certainly, it's evolved though, back in the 90s, there were a lot more Latino actually coming in the 80s, in the 90s, more Asian refugees coming in the 2000s, a lot more African coming in. And then we've had Middle East, a number of, obviously the war in Iraq had quite an impact on that region, and we saw a lot of Iraqi refugees come in. There was a real backlog for a while because they weren't allowing them to come over, and then finally they did allow a number to come over, and so we've been working with those folks.
What do you see? You run a very comprehensive program. What do you see are some of the issues that you're going to be facing in the near future or farther out?
I think when your economy goes through the kind of recession that we've just been put through, that we're still struggling to get out of, a lot of people fall backwards. And when you begin in a place of poverty and something like this happens, it's a lot harder to get back. And I think we're gonna feel the impacts of this recession for a number of years. And places like LearningWorks are doing whatever they can to try to give people the skills to get them caught up. You like to, when the economy's strong, you might be able to push ahead a little bit. You might be able to grow. You might be able to advance. What we're doing a lot of right now is really trying to get people back to where they were. And I mean this in a very broad macro sense, obviously, not on the individual basis. But I think for LearningWorks, we really are just seeing people begin to come out of this malaise and come out of our economy's doldrums and start to begin to look at how do they re-educate themselves, how do they start to find their way in this new economy in order to allow people to move forward. So for us, that's a big issue.
Do you feel you've had to shift your own resources to adjust to this? And has the community responded well to this shift in terms of your fundraising efforts?
Well, we have shifted to really focus on education, right? That's been our way of getting involved in this. And when we probably were serving under 1,000 people a year 5 years ago. We're serving 3,000 now, and that's through growth. And resources have come in with it. It has not been simply that we're getting people, exploding our classes out. We've been able to find resources that have allowed us to put programs in place that have allowed more people to come through our doors and get the services that they need, get the educational services that they need, or mental health. So it certainly puts pressure, but thankfully we've been able to grow in a way that's allowed that. So we're serving now close to 3,000 people a year in some capacity.
Mm. Do you know what your average cost per person is?
I do, actually. Our average cost...
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's good. Yeah, I haven't looked at those numbers in a while. We do them at the end of every year. Our average cost per successful person, I think the last numbers I looked at was around $3,000 to $4,000. So that depends on which program you're talking about and what kind of work they're doing. One thing that we have done, which has been very important from a nonprofit perspective, is we have put metrics in place for every one of our programs so we can really measure whether we are effective and how we can get better. And so one of the things is that 5 years ago, when we had a lot of programs, we had no measurements in place for a number of programs. There just was no way to measure them. How do you measure housing? You've got a house, but there's no success in it. And I mean, there's no success from an educational perspective,
Right.
or no transition, because we're not Preble Street, we're not a soup kitchen, and those are performed by other agencies doing great work. So we have moved away from the kinds of programs where you can't measure and moved into the programs where you can. So 25% of our programs, probably 5 years ago, actually, we were able to measure. Now it's closer to 80% of our programs we can measure, and our costs have gone down per client because we've just gotten better and better at it and been able to affect more people.
And I know you and I talked a little before the show. You want to stay out of the political realm a little bit, but
I have this political identity that we haven't discussed very much, so that's I just try to keep those separate.
But as a CEO, executive director of a nonprofit that has properties and everything else, how does the governor's budget proposal sit with you?
Well, you're talking about the nonprofit tax, I
Yes.
assume. That's the
Yes,
piece.
I'm
It actually won't have a huge impact on us because we don't have enough property. Also, one thing that people don't realize is a lot of nonprofits actually already pay taxes, and you pay what's called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. And some of the properties that we purchased, as part of buying them from the city, we kept them on the tax rolls. So St. Dominic's Housing is something that we manage. It pays taxes every year, so it's in the old St. Dom's Church, the girls' school. We
Right.
built housing there. Rosa True is another one. Rosa True is the old school that's on Park Street, Park Street. I always get those two confused. It's on Park Street. We've got 8 units of affordable housing. It pays taxes already. So a lot of what we have already does, because that's kind of how the original structure. So for us, it won't have too dramatic of an impact, really.
Okay.
But I'll put my little political hat on to say I don't think that's going to pass. So.
All right. That was
From what I understand,
right.
I'll pretend for a moment I'm on Channel 6 and say I think it's going down.
All right. So we're almost at our halfway point through the show, and this is the time where I get to ask you a trivia question.
Ah, excellent. Is it on politics or?
No, actually, I had a lead-in question to try and get you to this trivia question. So Deb knows I spend hours and hours researching these.
Do you try to design them appropriately for the guest, or is it more what you find interesting, or do you think this person?
Depends on the day.
Got it. Fair enough.
We had one guest on here, probably almost a year ago, where I said, when was roller derby established? And he just looked at me and said, 1935. Everybody knows that. And he was absolutely
Wow. Was it a guess, or did he know?
He was a guest.
No, I mean, did he guess, or did he actually know?
He actually knew.
I would not know the answer to that.
No, he's on a roller derby. But here's your question. You
Okay.
ready?
Yeah.
In 2013, what percentage of immigrants are limited English proficient? And let me define what limited English proficient means so everybody understands. Okay, it refers to persons ages 5 and older who reported speaking English not at all, not well, or well on the survey questionnaire. Individuals who reported speaking English, only English or speaking English very well are considered proficient, not non-proficient.
So this is nationwide, not in Maine.
Nationwide.
Nationwide, what percent?
What percentage of immigrants are limited English proficient? and we're going to come back. I'm going to do my midpoint identifier and let you think about it and make up an answer. How's that?
Beautiful.
All right. This is David Unger, and I'm host of Nonprofit Insider on WMPG 90.9 and 104.1 FM Community Radio of Southern Maine and Eastern New Hampshire. Joining us today is Ethan Strimling, CEO of LearningWorks. So the trivia question was, in 2013, what percentage of immigrants are limited English proficient?
So I'm going to say I think it's a lot lower than people realize. But again, it's a little hard in terms of how you define it, because I assume you're keeping in there asylees and refugees, maybe. I'm not sure how they designate it.
It's a very broad answer.
It's probably very broad in terms of a very broad question. And this is self-reporting? This is what they say?
Don't know. I just pulled the answer off the web.
Yeah, good. I'm going to keep asking questions here. See if isn't this game 20 questions? I think if I answer a few more questions.
There you go.
I'm going to say I think it's around 20%, 20 to 25% is what I'm going to say.
According to the Migration Policy Institute, in 2013, approximately 50% of the 41.1 million immigrants ages 5 and older were literacy. What did I say it was? LEP.
Limited English proficiency. All right,
yes.
I got that. Was about half of it.
Yes. Deb
What was
got it wrong,
What was
too.
your guess, Deb? Same. 50%.
No,
Exactly,
no.
yeah.
Deb hasn't gotten one of these questions right yet.
Wherever.
All right. So you've been doing this for a long time. You've seen a lot of things. You've seen a lot of changes. You talked about some of the turmoil that you saw when you came into it. What was your biggest aha moment? What was the thing that struck you the most? If you were to retire today, what's that one thing that you're going to remember?
You know, I think that what you realize when you do this work more and more, I often will say to the young people that we work with, here's whether it was an aha moment, whether it was a metanoia where you sort of had this enlightening this moment. I find it remarkable. People who are struggling to get out of poverty have to overcome so much more than most of us have to overcome, that it's remarkable to me that they get up in the morning. And when we see these kids who graduate, who have gone through our programs, who, by age 18 have been in jail, have been homeless, have been beaten up by their parents, have had terrible trouble in school because people don't know how to teach to them. They want them to do it the way they see it. And you see people every day getting up. And it's not that it's easy, because they go through these ringers.
Right.
It is so difficult. And you see them finally make it. It humbles you remarkably that, the things that I get frustrated by when I can't find funding for something, or whatever my job is hard for
Even
me to
on a
get.
personal level.
Even on a personal level,
Right.
for sure, but on a professional level, when I see what they accomplish, I think it's remarkable to see. I mean, back 20 years ago or something, I served on a commission that Governor McKernan put together to look at educational aspirations in the state of Maine and look at all our high schools. And our focus was to try to deal with graduation rates.
Right.
At the time, the graduation rate in Maine was 70% or something. And the governor came and met with us and said, look, I need your hard work. I need you to give me your all and give me your best, because we have got to get our graduation rate up to 90%. We cannot survive where we are. And we all, are like, oh, wow, holy smokes, 90%, huge. And then when you step back and you look at that and you say, well, what's wrong with 90%? What's wrong with 90% is that means that 10% you're okay with, right? When your goal is 90%, it means you've decided up front that I can let go of 10%.
Right.
And these kids, those are the 10%. And they have said, no, thank you. You may have decided that I could be discarded, but I'm not going to allow you to make that choice. I'm going to decide I'm not going to be discarded. And that to me is remarkable. That to me is saying to a system and saying to an economy and saying to a country that you don't get to let me fall through the cracks. I'm going to find my way through, even though you think it's acceptable that I do fall. And that's inspiring.
It is. And, I refer back to one of the clients that I'm working with right now on occasion where it's the same thing. Adults who live with developmental disabilities, the system says, no, no, no. And they're saying, but yes, 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 we want to try this. We want to be able to do this. We want to have meaningful employment. And the question is, how do we work with them to get them to that point?
It's very, our society, sadly, is very is very willing to discard too much.
Yeah.
Too many of our people in too many ways, and I find it remarkable people who are able to push back at that and just say, I'm not going to be one of those.
It is. And, when the system itself talks of people as statistics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Versus
90%?
Right. Versus
Right.
people. As you said, what are the lives of those 10% like?
Yeah. I mean, the battles that we have, I keep saying I'm not going to get political, but it always comes through, right?
I've been
you
waiting
can't
for you
avoid
to
it.
start.
I know. Right, exactly. I know. The battles that we have that have sort of put low-income people, that have demonized low-income people is all very much about these broad general categories and not about the specific human beings. And when you have conversations with people, Maine is a very generous state.
It is.
Maine will help a neighbor every day of the week. And they need to see their neighbor, and then they will. But they can disassociate somehow or another, or sometimes our politics can disassociate and look at an entire group of people in one way. And that becomes very destructive. It's like the gay marriage battle, right? Why did we win that battle finally? We won that battle because people began to see their neighbors who were out. And you could see it in polling. If you knew somebody who was out, your mind changed about whether or not people should be allowed to marry, right? You came to the conclusion that, hey, but I know that person. It's okay. What do I care?
Right.
And that's the same thing, I think, in poverty, unfortunately, is we read too much instead of seeing and being part of. I say to people anytime, if they think that immigrants are not contributing to our economy or not looking to try to figure out how to support their families, come down to Learning Works any day. I'll introduce you to 200 people every day who are coming into this building to figure out how to turn their lives around.
But how do we, as a community, address the issue of community inclusion for groups that are put aside, like the 10%? How do we get them involved in community activities and community functions and with open arms and engage them as community members versus another group?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
So if you have a group of immigrants who are in a program, but they socialize among themselves and they're part of themselves and they don't get into the other 90% using the 10%. Mm-hmm. How do we as a community work to get them into the other 90% and at least interact?
Well, I guess I would ask that question differently. I wouldn't ask how do we get them to interact. I'd ask myself, what am I doing to interact with them? Right. Okay. I mean, if I'm part of the 90%, my job is to figure out how do I interact with them. And that's difficult. I mean, look, America, Maine, we're a very segregated country by choice, right? People live with who they know and who they like and who happens to be in the same, right? We just are that way. And I don't know that we some people seek out opportunities to be in more diverse situations and some people don't. I think what we have to make sure is that we're never excluding people from different opportunities. So it really is just about what's going on in our own life. If we're creating a situation that people can't participate, that's the problem, right? What are we doing to say to ourselves that's keeping the 10% from joining, right? So it's always, for me, it's always about looking in the mirror to figure out what. If you're trying to get somebody else to be better, you usually need to look in the mirror and figure it out for yourself,
Absolutely. So we'll leave politics and the philosophical pieces.
Yeah, yes, right.
I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite child. If you had to identify one program that you're really proud of at Learning Works, what would it be?
I'm sure everybody says the same thing, which is that you can't really, because it's so fundamentally true in terms of all of the programs. My master's degree is in education with at-risk kids, and in particular with high school-aged youth. So I have, for whatever reason, I have a very deep connection to students who are in that program emotionally for me. So that group is a group that I've always loved to work with. I have really enjoyed seeing the power of the immigrant community and how it has built the city of Portland, and to be part of helping them build the city and the future of the city is also very exciting. So I'm going to choose both of them.
Okay.
I'm not as good with the elementary school kids. I love them dearly. They're a great program, but I can never quite get down on my hands and knees and have as much fun as some people seem so good at.
Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I'd be very curious what you've sort of seen over the last 20 years sort of in not-for-profits, and what do you think has sort of, do you think nonprofits are doing a better job today than they used to, and what are their gaps?
Actually, I think the Great Recession has helped nonprofits in a lot of different ways. And again, this is my personal opinion, and a lot of people disagree with me. But when the money's good and capital campaigns are happening and they're funding new programs, you find nonprofits moving away from their missions and the core of what they're all about. And when the recession came in, you saw a lot of retrenchment right back to the core missions. So I'm seeing a strong rebuild right now based on the core missions of what people are set up to do. And
one of the things that we've struggled with is trying to figure out how to bring more nonprofits together, right? It's a very difficult, everybody's got their own turf. Everybody's always got their own mission. Their mission could be almost identical, but one word different, and you just feel like that's the world. And we've had a few organizations join us, but I'd be very curious if you have thoughts about how to help nonprofits realize that merging and coming together might be a good path in terms of getting more resources to the people who need it most.
I'm on the camp that I'm not sure I agree with that all the time. I think that when nonprofits start talking about mergers, there's really one dominant nonprofit that will take over the other nonprofits. And there has to be that realization that, and talked about up front, that you will lose part of what your organizational history is, and that organization will go away in a merger. So I think that Maine has a very high number of nonprofits for the size of community that we have. So, I would say before you start a nonprofit, maybe you can get resources involved or get involved with a nonprofit that already exists that has a similar mission, rather than starting it with that one word different in the mission. So
I'd certainly agree with that, but I do think that there are a lot of us.
There are a lot.
And there's a lot of executive directors. There's a lot of CFOs.
And they're all competing for the limited monies that Maine has.
Which means it's not getting to the people who need it. So
right.
I think you're right. There's going to be a dominant one. One's going to sort of merge into the other. But that to me is okay. As long as the work's getting done and you're saving the lives you're trying to save.
No, I mean, right before I left the agency world, I merged, consolidated, took over 3 different agencies. We brought them into one. And it was a really hard process, and there was a lot of give and take back and forth, and a lot of emotional stuff. So
a lot of ego, I bet.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, I did. Did you get that on tape? I said it, not him, all right?
Okay, we got that straight. And if someone wanted to make a donation,
they can go to learningworks.me. Right on our website is the best place to do it. We got a secure link and all that work. So, but more importantly, if you want to come and see some good work, come by, because we'd love to have you take a tour, and we'll show you around, meet some people. And
do you always need volunteers?
We do. We have a lot of volunteers, so we're always looking for people. But what we really encourage people is to come through, take a look, see what you think, and then decide what's your best way to help and participate. Could be volunteering, could be giving money, could be doing all kinds of things, joining the board.
Great. And you have a full committee structure, so someone doesn't have to join a board right away?
Yeah, depends. We have advisory committees for different programs that we do, so people could step into those roles as well.
Good. Well, thank you. I'm glad you made it.
Me too.
Next week, we have Patty Kimball. Patty's the Executive Director of the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine. Music appears by courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find Mike's music on www.michaelhubbardmusic.com. Check out Mike's website to see where he's playing this weekend. Thanks to Deb Danger, NPI's executive engineer. You can catch Deb on Morning Street Fridays at 6:30 a.m. If you know a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at mpi@davidunger.net. Nonprofit Insider is now on Facebook. Post your questions and send in recommendations. And past shows are archived at www.tcmgr.com, NP Insider tab.
And stay tuned for Zvuky Russi, music from Mother Russia, coming up at 1:30. Thanks for listening.
I can only see